Good afternoon here at WDAY Weather and Ag in Focus. I'm Ag Director Bridgette Readel. Thanks for joining me for the afternoon, well, at least for the next hour. And as we expected, the weather, a little bit of a pattern shift today. Got a lot windier. So for those of you heading on outside, hang on to your hat. When I am here in my office and I can hear the wind howling outside, I know that's not a good thing. But as I watch temperatures through the afternoon, it kind of looks like a warm up. In fact, if all of this reads correctly, we're not going to see freezing temperatures overnight. Now, that's good news after all the snow that we just had over the weekend. The icicles hanging off the side of my house have, at least through yesterday, became rather significant. With any luck, they start falling off today and the rest of the roof clears as well. We could look at an overnight, not even of lows, but of highs in the 35-degree range. Well, somewhere towards early morning hours, dawn, we're probably going to see some change in precipitation. There is a chance for some rain, probably about a 50% chance, and that could change over to snow. Sort of depends on how the weather systems move through in the morning. It looks to continue to be rather windy tomorrow, but there's an opportunity for us to even get closer to 40 degrees. So let's see what Wednesday brings. Who knows? Weather may certainly give us a change, but wouldn't it be nice to see some of this snow melt? In fact, I'm pretty sure for many who did not go out and clean their yard because your driveway's gravel and it's nothing but mud in the first place, it'd be great to get some of this snow to melt off, things to start to dry out, and hopefully nobody's been getting stuck in your driveway, at least for the time being. Well, busy day today with much going on. We will be joined later on in our hour by Levi Otis. We're going to talk about the 2026 Land Annual Meeting that's going to be taking place up at Devil's Lake. We're looking for some more details from Levi. He can give us some background information on what this meeting's all about and what they'll be covering. Good news, Senator Kramer will be there as well. Now, for those of you who are listening but have questions, maybe you heard me talk about something earlier today on one of our morning shows or throughout today's Weather and Ag in Focus, feel free to call me. I'm at the JLA Insurance phone line, 701 293 9000. Happy to take those calls. And if you still are looking at some questions about what's going on for crop insurance, don't forget that Nate Thorsrud is a farmer too. He would love to visit with you if you give him a call, and he would help work out your questions. But you can reach me today, 701 293 9000. All right, many other things that are going to be going on. Well, first things first, later on today, and I'm not going to get a chance to get there simply because time is of the essence today. But here, starting at 2 o'clock, there will be some activity out at Castleton. Senator John Hoeven and U.S. Department of Ag Undersecretary Dr. Scott Hutchins are going to be, excuse me, making an announcement on the USDA Ag Research Service and an initiative that they're going to be doing here in the upper Midwest, specifically right here in North Dakota. There's actually a live stream for it, so I do plan to watch that live stream once I get off air from this show. If others of you are curious about that live stream and you'd like to see what's going on and can't get away from your desk, you could drop me an email, ag@flagfamily.com, and I would be glad to send you the live stream link as well. Now, that email box that I have is brought to us by Superior Grain Equipment. They give us superior grain handling, storage, drying, and other solutions for the farm. So give them a look out at superiorbins.com. But I appreciate the fact that they make sure my email box is running smoothly so you can send me requests. Again, if you would like to see what's happening at that Hoeven event here at 2 o'clock, you can certainly drop me an email and I would be happy to share that with you. You know, as our afternoons get busy, we're out in the yard more and more as spring comes. We'll be in the shop working on equipment. And then the time is going to come where we're frankly just in the equipment all the time. Maybe podcasts are something that you want to tune into. Well, I've discovered a couple that I wanted to mention today. One of them is the Degenerative Ag podcast. Okay, you may laugh, Degenerative Ag, but it's pretty good. This is for young farmers from the northern end of the Red River Valley, north central end perhaps of the valley, And they really have pretty honest and forward thinking discussions, whether it's from daylight savings time to wanting to talk about financial payments through FSA to farms to what's going to be happening for planting conditions and so much more. Now, not all the language is kid friendly, so pick your times to listen, but I might want to suggest the Degenerative Ag podcast. I know I've been enjoying listening to them as of late as well. Then there's also the Rural Well. I co-host the Rural Well with Loren Van Uwick. She is a sheep farmer and a licensed clinical therapist out of Ontario. And our latest episode was with a farmer who is also a recovering alcoholic. And he talks very pragmatically about that situation. How when you are consuming alcohol, you think that that's helping to lower your anxiety, when in fact, as you sober up, it just makes your anxiety much, much worse. And how overall the impacts in your life, the way it takes you away from your family and your operation, are more devastating than you might realize. So if you have an opportunity to listen, especially if you think that imposter syndrome might be something that you suffer from, I strongly recommend this discussion with our guest. Again, that is on the Rural Well podcast, and you can find that whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and other places, and especially YouTube, where sometimes it's nice to watch a podcast and treat it a little bit more like a television show than even just listening when you're working somewhere else. A few headlines for us, things that are going on agriculturally right now. If you recall back during the WDAY Radio Farm Show, we talked about the strike that was happening with workers at the JBS packing plant in Colorado, actually in Greeley. Well, after a 3-week picket strike, speaking out against wages and rising healthcare costs, the workers have decided to go back to work. JBS has resumed negotiations. The strike has ended, and that is a facility that employs about 3,800 workers. They had been the first major U.S. meatpacking strike in decades, but it sounds like things are back to the negotiating table, and work will continue at that JBS packing plant out in Colorado. Now, India wants to shore up their urea supplies. They're the largest urea importer, and they want to purchase 2.5 million metric tons of key crop nutrients to make sure they have enough on hand because they're getting a little bit nervous with all the things that are going on with Iran. India routinely relies on global tenders to secure urea for their domestic consumption, and the imports for them are very critical for their rice, corn, and soybean crops, which they intend to start planting in June with the arrival of their monsoon season. And so India's urea production fell last month due to limited gas availability, and following this, that was natural gas. And following the start of this Middle Eastern conflict, though their supplies to urea plants have improved in the last couple of weeks, but again, India is looking to shore up their supplies. Word was received that a Russian ship carrying wheat was believed to have been sunk in the Sea of Azov after a Ukrainian drone attack had been found. They found the ship, they towed it to shore, so it wasn't completely sunk. It was attacked, it was towed to shore. There has unfortunately been a death toll of 3 in that attack. Analysts say that the April 5th attack on the ship added to the risks of the global food security and ag trade in that region. The Grain Consultancy Group earlier described the incident as the first known sinking of a grain-loaded ship in the Black Sea area, and that's a major grain trading route, and that's the first attack since the start of the war against Ukraine. So considering what's going on with Iran's conflict, the rather big paralysis of Washington, D.C., Moscow, and Kiev, the risk will further escalate. So just a heads up that Russian grain ship that was thought to have been sunk was in fact towed back to shore after heavy damage. When it comes to weather, later this season we'll be experiencing hurricanes. And hurricane maps, they're getting a makeover. After a 2-year experimental run, an updated tracking forecast cone graphic will now be moving into the starring role according to the National Hurricane Center for the summer. This new graphic is to debut when the first tropical storm forms. It's one of several changes in the Hurricane Center that they're making for the Atlantic season, which actually begins soon, starting June 1st. Members of the Hurricane Center staff sat down and have talked about what this change is going to look like. The widely recognized 5-day tracographic, often called the cone of uncertainty, has been used since 2002, but is often misunderstood. So there have been revisions. The new graphic adds the inland tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings on the continental United States, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands as well. So there's no better way to start checking out what's happening with hurricane risk than by keeping an eye out on those storms. Folks, more headlines to come. Guests to join us, weather to recap, and all of that will continue after we get the livestock report from the American Ag Network. We'll be back. Yesterday, we had the drainage difference with landmark companies. And thank you again to Blake Sunday for joining us as we talked all about the things that happen with drain tile in this region and really all of the horizontal drilling and other products that they have over at landmark companies. If you are considering a project, maybe as you're watching this snow melt and thinking, we could do something different here, why don't you give those folks a call over there? In fact, you can even just go ahead, contact them, landmarkteams.com. I'd be happy to answer those questions. Well, tomorrow, as we are lining up more guests for the week, you're going to want to make sure to tune into our live stream with Lighthouse Commodities. Again, that live stream is on Facebook, YouTube, and Acres TV. And in fact, we will have that live stream as operational as fast as we can because our guest is going to be excellent. She is actually a returning Assistant Ag Director, Emma Gullix. And Emma has been fantastic on air. She's even filled in for me on days when I had to be gone. But she also was part of a group of NDSU Ag students who were recently in the European Union. Now, I don't want to give everything away, but she was sending me pictures today of what she saw and the things that we're going to be talking about tomorrow. So if you're curious about ag in Europe from a first-hand view, especially, I like the idea that we're going to have a young person's perspective, someone whose eyes are going to be very open to what they're seeing and doing. You're going to want to join us tomorrow when Emma Gullix is in the studio with us. And again, she is one of the previous Cass County Farm Bureau Assistant Ag Directors. Then on Thursday, we're going to be joined by Justin Keeler. So Justin is the head of Gen Ag out of Winkler, Manitoba. Okay, you know, I like to talk equipment. I've kind of become a machinery geek in the last few years. But even better, this is an opportunity to talk about an expansion of their business from Winkler down here into the States. And they've got some exciting things to share. So we're going to talk about their product line, where their new dealerships are going to be, and so much more. I have had the opportunity to be a speaker at events that Gen Ag has done up in Winkler, and they run a great ship. They have quality technicians to be working on your equipment. They have great stores and outlets that go the extra mile to bring equipment to you. And we're going to find out about their business model and so much more that they're doing at Gen Ag as they come into our market here in the Dakotas. Friday, Greg Hansen will join us for Market Uncovered. We had a skip last Friday. It was Good Friday. We just flat weren't on air. But now Greg is back. And in that time, since we've talked to Greg last, we've had a WDAY report from USDA. So we're going to need to find out how that impacted our grain markets short term and long term. But maybe you have questions. And I would love for people to send those in because the conversation is so much more fun when we have questions directly from those of you who are listening. Now, I'll be honest. Most of the listeners are a pretty passive group. Farmers don't necessarily call a lot unless they got a real bee in their bonnet. But if you want to send me the emails, well, you can. Again, that's ag@flagfamily.com. Would love to have you. And then lastly, on Friday, we'll be joined by Alexandra. She is the head of Crop Life America. We're going to talk about their Be Sure campaign. And if you're wondering what that means, well, good news. You should be here on Friday then when we talk to her during the Weather and Ag and Focus hour from 1 to 2 o'clock. So that's just a highlight of what we're going to be seeing this week. Speaking of bees, I'm not sure if everybody heard me talking about the disposable bees earlier last week, actually. There is actually a firm in the United States that is now working to have bees. They're engineered. They only last 2 to 3 weeks. And their whole goal is for crop pollination. There are probably $50 billion worth of crops in the United States that need those pollinators. And sometimes bees aren't always around when you need them. They're not in the right crop. And this way, their sole purpose is to move pollen, to do the pollination. And frankly, after that, in that very short lifespan, then the bees die. Well, it's quite a situation. But I thought that was fairly interesting is, we're not only working on crop and livestock, but what affects us, like the insects such as the bees. As we are talking about insects and so forth. All right, let's mention nematodes. Well, for those who thought, I don't know what that is, it's okay. Let's talk about a nematode. They're actually an almost invisible worm, and they're practically impossible to see with the naked eye. But soybean cyst nematodes are incredibly prevalent here in the Red River Valley. In conversations that I had with farmers in the last couple of summers, there have even been fields that were entirely abandoned from planting soybeans on them because the cyst nematodes were so devastating to the yield. How can that change? There's a new digital tool coming from Syngenta, and it's called Nemadigital, which kind of makes the invisible visible. It's technology that's using satellite imagery and AI, this time I'm talking about artificial intelligence, to scan soybean fields for crop stress that might mimic nematode damage. Now, the goal is to bridge the gap between what a farmer can see and what's actually happening in the crop beneath the soil surface. Farmers might not even know that they're losing yield due to this microscopic pest. So, the help here could arrive by taking the satellite-based algorithm that's trained to distinguish nematode pressure from other common headaches like nutrient deficiency, soil compaction, or even just simple soil and field anomalies. They're going to analyze multiple years of historic satellite data, and then the system searches for patterns that match the nematode behavior. So for farmers and retailers, this process is designed to be very hands-off. Syngenta really only needs basic information, field boundaries, crop history. Much of that's already automated for use. And from there, the data goes out and is 90% accurate. So you're able to detect that situation with the nematodes. When could this be coming to you? Well, the beta testing for it is all taking place in states that begin with an I. Illinois, Indiana, Iowa. We'll see that coming here, and the potential for the year 2027 to be a nationwide launch date is pretty high. When we listen to folks talk from the from the Cis Nematode Coalition, they talk about the fact that nematodes routinely cause 25% yield damage in infected soybeans, and that can skyrocket up to almost 70. As I mentioned before, there were fields that were utterly abandoned from soybeans because of the concern with how much yield damage would happen. So, potential commercial launch could be coming in 2027. So, the message is pretty simple. Don't confuse what might be invisible with what's absent. A lot of times the way we look for soybean cyst nematode is by doing soil sampling. And we will take those soil samples, send them into the lab for analysis. But if we do our soil sampling in a particular spot and we don't sample 3 or 4 feet away, but that could be a hotbed of nematode eggs, we might have missed the mark and we might not know what's there. So this could be a way to improve what we're already doing with our soil sampling. And there are so many other reasons and benefits for soil sampling. For those of you who are thinking, oh, what does soil sampling mean? Okay, visualize with me if you will. You got your pickup, you took the passenger seat out, you drilled a hole in the floor, and it's a pretty wide hole because you have to have the diameter large enough so that a hydraulic cylinder can pass through that hole. You have a probe basically in your passenger seat area. Using the hydraulics, you can push that probe down through the floorboard into the soil, and it pulls up a soil core, a cylindrical core of soil that you then bag and tag and send off to your favorite soil lab. Here in the region, the majority of our soil samples go to AgVice at Northwood. Now that's a really basic description of what folks are doing. But I got a lot of hilarious stories when that can go wrong. And the reason you're using that hydraulic probe to go down is you're probably testing somewhere in that 2 to 4 feet below the surface area. Because in the past, when we've done it by just using a hand probe, pushing it in by hand and by foot to be able to get a soil core back up, maybe only getting 6 to 12 inches. So the deeper depth gives you a better reading on what's happening in your soil. Okay, there's our educational moment on soybean cyst nematode for right now. When we return, we'll be joined by Levi Otis. We're going to find out what's happening in Devil's Lake later this week. He'll fill us in on all those details after the bottom of the hour news. it's getting to be that time of the year where we have less farm involved meetings going on, right? Folks are getting ready to get in the shop, get work done, but don't overlook those that could be incredibly important to what you're doing today. And one of those that you might want to take the time to get to, especially because we've had all this snow that's holding us back, would be the 2026 Land Annual Meeting. Levi Otis is joining us to talk about what that meeting's about. Okay, Levi, I'm curious. How often has this been held if it's called the annual meeting, and what are you covering here? Who's behind the group that's putting it on, that type of thing?
Yeah, so thanks, Bridgette. The Land Association's been around for quite a long time. Built by a bunch of farmers several years ago. Working on U.S. Fish and Wildlife easements is kind of the main cause. As you know, pre-1976 easements were signed up by farmers who were paid a small dollar amount to protect wetlands. Those farmers acknowledged at the time, I'm not going to drain that wetland. Prices were low, so they took the payment, and the little fine print was beyond just draining the wetland. It kind of locked up the entire tract of land. So as I've explained previously, it would be like selling the second floor of an office building and then wanting to renovate maybe the 72nd floor and not being able to because the second floor was sold to the federal government who put an easement on, and now you have to get permission from them to renovate another floor that doesn't impact it. And so these wetlands, as you know, as an agronomist and travel the state, how many saline acres we have out there, and it's over 6 million. Late 80s, we had about 500,000 saline acres, and these easements and not being able to improve the ground around the easement is just degrading the soil, and nothing's growing, not even a kochia weed. So we're trying to come up with solutions and work with Department of Interior and U.S. Fish and Wildlife to be able to improve that ground around, right? We still can't drain a wetland, whether it's a easement wetland or NRCS, it's still illegal. But just to improve the ground around it so we can get some growth. Right now we can't even get prairie grasses. So Land Association has been primarily focused on that, and then other federal overreach or bureaucracy working within the agencies and trying to assist in changing some of the rules so we have smart policy, just not over-the-top regulation.
And that's the biggest thing, is the smart policy. We see that in so many different areas of government. Now, because government's involved, you've got some great folks coming to speak and help understand where we are at in all of this process. One of them is Senator Kevin Cramer, and probably takes quite a bit to get Senator Cramer to be able to come to a meeting in Devils Lake these days. So kudos to you for being able to do that.
Well, Senator Cramer, when he went into Congress in 2014, reached out right away, and he said, "I need to learn and understand this U.S. Fish and Wildlife thing." And kudos to him. He has really been the leader on pushing for a solution. Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak, since she's been elected to Congress, has now jumped on it very hard as well, trying to figure out the solutions which it's going to work for the landowner, the person who owns the land, wildlife, and all my farming buddies. They are all conservationists, right? They are hunters. They do believe in habitat. In fact, habitat increases soil health. Soil health makes profitability. So I don't understand the disconnect other than people being one-sided one way or the other.
Man, I'm with you. Farmers are the conservationists, and they want to do the right thing. They would like to do it without a ridiculous amount of red tape and being able to get this process moved forward. I like that you also have a panel discussion updating where this U.S. Fish and Wildlife lawsuit sits. And then additionally, you have a panel talking about water conveyance ditches, economic impacts, etc. So if you think about where we're at with that wildlife lawsuit first, Do you feel like forward progress is being made, only it's being made in inches, not leaps and bounds?
Well, I would say that's been the feeling of the past.
Okay.
Conveniently, one of our neighbors is now the Secretary of Interior, so the speed in which things happen faster. So I've been very grateful for that, because it's not a one versus them or us versus them. It's the reality when you work in this business and understand kind of what the government has done. I don't think anybody could actually look at the facts and not think, okay, we need to fix something here. But yeah, I am encouraged. You know, there are several lawsuits out there with Pacific Legal Foundation and some other attorneys and landowners against them. Hopefully there's going to be some solutions. It's going to be fun to get the update. Those lawyers that are on that panel are very, very, very high powered and very well respected. They do a lot of great things for us as the ag community, especially here in North Dakota. The water conveyance, Max Steffes with Steffes Auctions and Kurt Lisney with More Engineering are going to talk about, you know, the land values and how awful it is when you try to sell a piece of ground with an easement on it. And Kurt's going to talk about the economic impacts of water conveyance and how we can do it. We can be neighborly. We can work together and build infrastructure that helps everybody. And we're going to just have a nice discussion so that if farmers are out there and they're interested in teaming up with their neighbors to build either private ditches or work with the watershed to build ditches, what does that process look like? What are estimated costs, or what do farmers have to think about when they go knocking on each other's doors to say, hey, why don't we look at a solution here? So it's really going to be fun. And then also Shannon Full, the chamber president here in Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo Chamber, she's going to come up and talk about why the chamber is so aggressive in assisting in crafting good ag policy. And that's, you know, economics. Farmers spend money in Fargo. We've got massive locally owned businesses here that are headquartered here. And she sees it on both sides of the river, what good policy and bad policy does for our local economy. And she's also aware that people that live outside of Fargo are afraid that Fargo is becoming Minneapolis and going to make the rules for the rest of the state. So her assistance in keeping the legislators, the 25% that live in Cass County, educated on what is good and what is bad for business and farm policy. It's just nice to have an ally like that.
That is a huge step in the right direction, and that does bring comfort to many, because you're right, agriculture in this region, we want to make sure everybody feels better about it. You know, my goal every single day is to educate and to make sure that people are on the same page, so we don't have those fights legislatively when someone has a misunderstanding, and we want them to see our economic impacts and why folks are doing the right thing in a variety of ways in agriculture. Levi, when you think about this meeting, it's not just for farmers who have an easement or who might be in the Devil's Lake area, correct? Who would you suggest should be in attendance on Thursday?
Well, I think anybody that wants to learn more about the land association and kind of what our goals and objectives are. Anybody that has had easements or run-ins with maybe the federal government on their land or their farming ground that they might not own, but they have to deal with this. I've seen a lot of people been told a lot of misinformation from federal agencies. And it's not until somebody like me comes into the room and says that's not true, right? And then they can, then they get a better chance at doing some projects. But it shouldn't be that way. And that's what we need to keep conveying is there are right answers and there are wrong answers, and we need to hold people accountable when they're not giving good advice when they're paid to do so. So that's kind of where we're at.
So Thursday, things actually kick off Wednesday night on April 8th. There is a social and some networking that can happen on Wednesday night at 7. This will be out at the Shores, which is at Woodland Resort by Devil's Lake. And then Thursday, the registration networking kicks off at 9. Be prepared to start your meeting at 10, and things will wrap up by mid-afternoon. So if you have an interest and you're listening and you're thinking, how do I get involved? Levi, I can have folks email me, ag@flagfamily.com, and I'll share the contact information unless you have a website or email address you want to share as well.
Yeah, you can send them to landofnd.com. It's landofnd.com. There's some information on there. Otherwise, you can email us at landofnd@gmail.com. That's landofnd@gmail.com, and feel free to just RSVP and say that you want to come, and we'll give you some direction there. But yeah, the shores at Woodland Resort in Devil's Lake. It's going to be a fun time, and looking forward to networking with some folks tomorrow night, sharing some stories, and then we'll get down to business on Thursday.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today, Levi. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Bridgette. You take care. Bye-bye.
You too. All right. And folks, when we come back, I'll recap the weather, and I got a few more headlines we want to touch on, so don't go anywhere. So many of you have heard me talk before about the wildfires that ran through Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. Nebraska itself losing nearly 1 million acres to wildfire. And as you listen to ranchers in that area, after the fire went through, they said it basically looks like a kid's sandbox. All vegetation has been wiped out. For those who have cattle in the region, they lost not only hay and grazing lands, they lost fence posts, wire, and in many cases, they lost part of their herd. Animals were affected and may have died then, but also may now be fighting things like pneumonia and respiratory distress further on down the line. As some of those mama cows go to calve, they may be aborting calves due to the stress. There's a lot on the hearts of ranchers in those three states in that region. If you have extra hay and you are interested in helping to donate, you are welcome to call Farm Rescue for Operation Hay Lift. They would indeed like to help be part of more convoys that are taking hay, bales of straw, and other supplies, I should say, down to those areas in, again, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. And there are a lot of folks that are coordinating those efforts. They're working with the livestock associations in all those states. I have some resources, basically from social media, folks on Twitter, etc., who, if you're interested, certainly drop me that email again to my Superior Grain Equipment sponsored email address, which is ag@flagfamily.com. And I would be happy to share with you how you can get in touch with some of those areas directly, or you can go to Farm Rescue. And Farm Rescue will help you be a part of Operation Hay Lift. Now, when talking about Farm Rescue, some of you who are listening have your CDL, your commercial driver's license. If in fact you do, that's one of the areas where Farm Rescue is certainly looking for more volunteers. They need folks who are able to drive semis to move equipment around to different areas when they are on their way to help farmers and ranchers. Farm Rescue is a North Dakota-based nonprofit. They now operate in 11 states. And because of that, farmers reach out when they are in crisis, whether it is due to illness or injuries and other situations that happen. These CDL drivers are really needed to help move equipment around, maybe hay for things like Operation Hay Lift and others. If you could find the time to help donate your time to Farm Rescue, they would tremendously appreciate it. You can specify where you want to be driving. You don't have to be going over the road all the way down to Kansas. You can be working here locally, but they would love to hear from you, especially if you have your CDL. Even if you don't, for those who want to take the time to operate grain carts, combines during haying season, maybe you're willing to run a baler, and during planting, maybe you want to get in and run that corn planter. They would like to hear from you. So check them out, farmrescue.org. They are a wonderful organization here in our region who could always use an extra helping hand. North Dakota is known for wheat production. That's one of the things that when people reach out about the state and our agriculture, that's the first thing they ask about. Now, there's no doubt that wheat acres have been on the decline over the last couple of years, whether it's spring and or winter wheat. But there might be some reasons to bring a little bit more wheat back to the region. Corteva Agriscience has a new hybrid technology that they hope changes the trajectory of wheat yield. They plan to introduce the first hybrid wheat seed in 2027. This is a hybrid that is grown. It is not gene edited. It is not GMO. So what they're truly doing is using their breeding program to bring it forward. I happen to know that some of that wheat is specifically suited for the Red River Valley. I may have accidentally stumbled across some last summer in some field trials. So seed companies and researchers have tried for many years to make hybrid wheat work, but a lot of those attempts just fell short. The main challenge was producing the seed effectively and reliably. Now, the biology, the genetics, the economics never really lined up well to make all of this work. But a turning point came in 2018. That was when the wheat genome was mapped and published by the International Wheat Genome Sequencing Consortium. That's a lot of words that I'm really glad I don't have to type in an email every day, by the way. But it's a global collaboration of 200 researchers from 73 different institutions. Now, through all of that, that's where we've started to see some success in the hybrid wheat. Hard red spring wheat is considered to be the aristocrat of wheats, and what's most popularly grown as far as wheat is concerned here in North Dakota. This is a wheat that is used in things like bagels, artesian health breads, pizza crust, and other strong dough applications. And the bulk of that hard red spring or winter wheat is grown in Montana, the Dakotas, and Idaho and Washington. So with the potential for this hard red winter wheat to be launched in 2027, that'll be the first hybrid out. The product's been built well. The most obvious question that farmers are asking is, will the hybrids deliver yield once we get them to the field? Now, some of this work has been done with local researchers, including Yoko Wiersma from the University of Minnesota. And Wiersma says, look, the number one benefit is yield and productivity. And we expect the first product we release to give a 10+% yield advantage over leading competitive varieties. Researchers have been seeing that this wheat hybrid testing grows even more striking under stress. If you have a water-limited environment where overall yield levels fall for every other wheat product, this new hybrid has a valuable advantage with its technology. So the crop seems to be a bit more stable under stressful conditions. We're going to see where all of that leads. Back to that weather, doesn't look like it's going to freeze overnight. Well, now, wouldn't that be exciting? Wind is going to stay up, though. It's a bad hair day. You're not going to want to necessarily drive with the top down, especially because it's really only in the low 30s right now. If temperatures stay up, that's going to help us do some great thawing and melting overnight. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm looking forward to everything that is not yet off the house fall down, and let's get it melted, and let's get things moving forward. We may see some precipitation begin in the early pre-dawn hours and move into the morning. Could be in the form of some rain, maybe a few flakes if pockets do get that cool. Then we look for a little bit of a warm-up. And windy again. I don't know about everybody else, but I swear to you, this has been the windiest winter I can remember in a long time. So stay out of the way, let the melting begin, and stay tuned for the Jay Thomas Show that's coming up next.